we're diving straight into seeds. So our target audience is 8 to 80. Basically, we want families to be playing this like families have been playing Monopoly for so many years before. This is how it all started. During quarantine, I painted this very intricately after having ideated, and this is what I came up with, and I'll be explaining the game mechanics as well. I'm especially proud of the fish, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. All right, so the core concepts, number one is the currency, as Johnny mentioned, is seeds. And so we wanted to obviously engage with this whole association heuristics aspect. So we want seeds to be a primer effect for certain behaviors. And we also wanted to signal that seeds comes directly from the environment. So it's also like, it's like really bringing together the idea that in order to participate in an economy, you are drawing from natural resources. It's not like, oh, well, the central bank prints money and then I get to spend that. It's very different. And so in order to keep on participating in an economy, you need to regenerate seeds. And importantly, seeds, you cannot win the game with seeds. Seeds is just a mechanism to keep on producing and keep on playing. Then another concept are investment cards or smart cards. We're still playing around with the name. But essentially these are a series of projects that you can do in the game. And some of these projects allow you to create social value. So they allow you to accumulate smart points, which is the metric that determines who is the winner. So the one who accumulates the most amount of smart points wins the game. And then the other type of investment is seeds generating investments, which consistently regenerate seeds in order to keep on creating social value that will allow you to win the game. So you need to regenerate investment. You need regenerative investments on one hand that will regenerate seeds, and then smart point investments on the other hand that actually allow you to win the game. So our metric for success is essentially smart points, and it's basically to say accumulating seeds won't get you anywhere. You need to actively create different kinds of values, so such as cultural, environmental, and social, in order to get more smart points than your opponent. Well, I guess you wouldn't call it opponent, you would call them co-player. We're gonna have to play with that terminology. Okay, so this is a diagram that I give full credit to Courtney Membeck if she is here. She very kindly contributed her time to help me translate my very homemade game into a diagram that you guys could actually interact with and understand a little better. So you start at the launch pad. Every player is given 5 investment cards, which are the project cards, at random. The first round you have to acquire empty land. So for a certain price, for now it's say 10 seeds, and that signifies that if you want to acquire land, you need to draw from natural resources to make that happen. And then on the second land, you can start playing different kinds of investments on this acquired land. So either smart point generating investments or seeds generating investments. Then you have different interactive cases, for example, the round table. And if you land on this case, you get to draw a red card, and this gives you a set of questions at random about the 9 planetary boundaries or the social foundation that you get to partner up with someone in order to solve and to answer it. And if you solve it well, the first player gets to allocate 80 smart points between both players as he or she thinks is fair. Another such case is Creative Action Lab, where you get to draw one of the green cards. And so here you get a social challenge. So say your community is lacking in something, or you need to provide some sort of service from the perspective of a different stakeholder. So it could be, for example, a governmental stakeholder, you are a president, or more on the community level, say you are a mayor or you could be a CEO, how can you approach this challenge and solve it? The rest of the players would be judges and will evaluate your answer and determine, according to different principles that we can specify, how many points you should get, from 50 to 100 smart points. The other one is Art Center, where you draw either one of the red or green cards, and then you are given a key word to interact with. It could be, for example, the ozone layer, and then you have to make a little drawing a la Pictionary, and whoever of the other players solves it first gets to split the smart points with you. So we're trying to make it interactive, we're trying to make it fun, and we are trying to make the environment participant in the economy as well. So for example, if you land on one of these purple cases, these are the common pool resources, and they will automatically give you a boost in smart points. So, right, for example, cases like Roundtable are about rewarding cooperation through partnering up to solve a problem. Then cards like Creative Action Lab are meant to reward reciprocity. So if I'm a stakeholder in the economy, how can I focus my energy towards solving a problem rather than making profit from people's needs solely? I'm not against profit per se, but I think there needs the focus of actually engaging business, and entrepreneurship should be, but what need am I filling and what problem am I solving? And this is the example of one of the keywords that you would interact with. So in this case, the word would be up here, and you would get a little notepad and just draw however you envision it so that people can answer correctly. So I'm setting up a few prompts, and here you can always go back and refer to the whiteboard. And if you have sparks of genius in the middle of the presentation, go right ahead and just add it. So the first thing we're thinking of is, what are the kinds of values that we would like to see in a donut economy? And for example, Daniel Kahneman's advice for designing a behavioral change intervention is, we need to start by thinking, why aren't they doing it already? What kind of primers, what kind of associations are getting in the way of us actually having those values, such as benevolence and universalism? So for those of you who have read Donut Economy, they have this really good diagram by Schwartz. He created this diagram about the main values that are present almost across the board in all kinds of different cultures. And basically what they're saying is that values are like muscles, and the more you appeal to them, it's like the availability heuristic at play, right? The more you refer to certain values, the stronger they will become. So if you're living in a society that consistently rewards achievement and power, you will gear towards self-enhancement. And if you live in a culture that rewards universalism and benevolence, you will gear towards these values as well. So our first prompt is, given that we are intuitive decision makers, how can we make it so that universalism and benevolence are an automatic reaction? What will those triggers be in gameplay? So what we are doing right now, the heuristics that engage with these aspects, so sort of like cooperation and reciprocity, are Roundtable and Creative Action Lab, right? So what we want to do is make these kinds of behaviors be tied with success. So we want that association to be made very clear and very explicit. Being self-absorbed and individualistic will not help you win in seats. Rather, need to think of it in a very different direction. So competition is still going to be a factor, because we also can never forget that it's so important that this game be fun. Because if not, then that's against the whole point. Daniel Kahneman also says that Actually, no, this was the game factory experiment. But what they said is that social behaviors are best learned in social environments. So it needs to be natural. It can't feel like you are teaching a kid something. It just has to be natural play. That's how these very automatic assumptions are formed. The second prompt we're engaging with is board design. So the first factor that we're thinking of is, this is our standing point, that we want the board, which would be this middle part, for instance, to be embedded within between natural resources provided by the earth and sustained by the economy, which are these different different stakeholders, the market, household, state, and commons. And I think it would be cool to just zoom it into the micro level just a little bit more, to make it more realistic. So allow people to maybe role play and become a president, and then, I don't know, become a 10-year-old kid, and what can a 10-year-old do to solve a problem in their community? Or become a mayor, and all of these different people and different perspectives that you can engage with. And what can these people do on different levels to solve a challenge? So our second prompt in this particular aspect, 2.2, is systems thinking. So Monopoly is very linear in its way of thinking, meaning that the point that firstly, dollars come from the central bank, and this allows you to buy property and then invest in real estate and then accumulate capital and accumulate more monopoly dollars. So it's very one way up. And what we're trying to do in seeds is to make it a system, a dynamic system. So seeds come from the environment. So that's a negative flow of extraction, which sustains economic activity. And the way you engage in the economy is by making investments that will give you either smart points or seeds. And then these allow you to acquire social value. And the more needs society has, the more they will demand products, right? So this is a self-reinforcing cycle. So you need to think of, how are you going to balance that cycle out so that business is also giving back to the resources that allow it to exist in the first place. So that's the rate of regeneration. So this is a balancing cycle, and this is a reinforcing one. So we need to make sure that we're closing this loop in gameplay as well. What we take, we put back in. So the way we're doing this in seeds is represented in this way. The environment gives you seeds, allows you to make smart investments that fulfill social needs, and these give you smart points and allow you to regenerate seeds, which go back into the environment. So the strategy is to have the optimal combination of smart points generating and seeds generating investments, so that you can accumulate and make as many smart points as you possibly can, create as much value as you possibly can, without depleting the resources that you need to participate in this economy. Third prompt is alternative currency design. So right now, our alternative currency design is seeds. So what's interesting about currency is that currency is a primer. And so we're going back to heuristics right now. But for example, this researcher called Kathleen Cole, she made an experiment on how, for example, traditional dollars could prime certain behaviors. And just a simple reminder of dollars, and for example, a stack of Monopoly dollars nearby, made a group of undergraduate students behave much more individualistically. So they would be less likely to help their peers who pretended to need help with a problem. They would distance themselves physically more. Their level of competition would be enhanced. And so it's very interesting to think how money and the way that you represent it and engage with it can lead to such radical behavioral shifts. So if traditional dollars prime individualism, how can seeds prime regenerative behaviors is what I'm calling it. But let's think of how can it prime cooperation, regeneration, and reciprocity. And this takes us to conceptualizing and measuring success. So we need to really decouple currency and success, because currency is just a way to sustain economic activity, whereas success can be completely different from that. So say in our game, success is how much social environmental value you create. And you cannot do that just by accumulating seeds. It's going to get you nowhere. So what causes success in seeds is basically how much environmental and social and cultural value you create. So we're thinking of how can we positively harness that competitive drive in people without tying it into this impulse to accumulate at the expense of others. So we're trying to say if seeds is the primer and it impulses you to make smart investments because you know that the measure of success is how much you contribute to society. So then it's a win-win. It's a positive sum success when suddenly success is no longer measured in material and capitalistic measures. Rather, you can define success as like how much social approval am I gaining? Because I think there's always that aspect behind it all. We are social animals before we are economic beings. So how can we harness competition towards social acceptance instead of material accumulation? So yeah, we're leaving behind the old path to victory, which is whoever accumulates the most wins. And the new path is whoever generates the highest amount of smart points without depleting their seeds reservoir wins. Our metric is smart points. And we can also think of what exactly this will encapsulate. What does success mean in an environment like this? And I really invite you to think about that and engage with that. Prompt number 5 is stimulating regenerative business. And these are the investment cards. So the question is, how is business done in a regenerative economy? And we want the message to be the purpose of doing business is to meet social needs and regenerate the environment. You have 2 different kinds, and this is kind of made like return on investment type things. Seeds generating investments will give you much more seeds relative to smart points. So say a player lands on your investment, and so they will pay, for example, 16 seeds for service in a seeds generating one, and you will get 8 smart points as well. And in the case of a smart point generating, you will get more smart points relative to seeds. Say for a school, you will get 16 smart points and then only 8 seeds for service. But this, of course, is an idea that needs to be refined, because when I did try to play this game, it was definitely an issue to keep track of these different value measures and point system, and I think it can be done a lot better. Yeah, so what we're trying to do right now is rethink the board design to make it so much better than what I have designed, because we can really think of it in terms of layers or the shape of it, and we can think of what is the inner layer going to be, how can we make that interactive with the outer layer, what is the directionality, for example, in this one, it goes towards the inside, like what's the movement, what's the flow of the game going to be like. Then what is the card design going to be like if we are going to develop this idea of investment cards? How can they be more strategic? How can there be more of a sense of strategy inside the game and creating that optimal balance between seeds generating and smart point generating and just make it really engaging. We're also thinking of having a seeds website, which would be an interactive platform where players can actually upload real challenges that are happening in their own communities, or where they can contribute questions to the round table red cards. And art, I think, Johnny gave a really great point in saying that we want it to be beautiful and just a pleasure to look at. And these are just my crazy ideas on what I would love it to look like. And I want it to be funky, something that has really not been seen before. And what can our players look like? Why not just make it a little bit weird, a little bit funny? I think at the end of the day, just, we are trying to change things. So why don't we do that across the board?